Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the ever-improving No Soundbites Allowed podcast. My name is Michael Vasquez. We thank you for joining us in this adventure of describing the politics that go on in our nation on a personal and local level as often as possible, giving you, the audience, more than just 30 seconds to understand what's going on in our nation. We look forward to joining you as we go. Just sit back, enjoy the ride. Please remember, if you like the episodes, like it, share it, let other people know, and if you can, please donate, even if it's $2, even if it's $5, because it all makes a difference. We thank you, and here we go. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. This is Michael Ross, your host at your favorite podcast, the No Soundbites Allowed podcast, and it's a little bit late, and everyone's a little tired, but we wanted to take the opportunity to speak with the candidate for the 122nd Assembly District, one of the challengers in the race, and that would be Nick Libous. He's with us today. He's just been at an event, and you gotta excuse my voice there, but he's just been at an event, and he's taken an opportunity to speak with us, and more importantly, to the voters, ahead of the September 13th Republican primary that'll be taking place between him and the incumbent Assemblyman Clifford Crouch. How are you doing, Nick?
Good, Mike. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm happy to have you on, and I'm always glad. I know I should mention for everyone two things. One, I have met Nick before, just like many of the politicians throughout the southern tier and central New York. So we have met in person many times. And the second thing I should mention is that, excuse me, my voice is all over the place today. I wanted to mention, oh God, I don't even remember what I was going to mention.
What's not been that important?
No. That we know each other. Okay, there you go.
I think what's real important, Mike, is that people get out to vote this Thursday, September the 13th. I think that's a real important message I wanted to get out there, and I wanted to start with. But like I said, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me. It's tough getting the word out in a district in a primary like this, because it seems like media just doesn't really want to pay much attention to it. So I really do appreciate you doing the interview and taking time for it.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, that's what I was going to say. We were going to do this last week on Tuesday, and in fact, that was because of my error. I was traveling, and that's why we were delayed. So I do thank you for taking the call now. Separate of that, and it is important. The primaries are absolutely important. It's an expression of people's voice in their vote when they go out and speak to the public. So I think this is very important. And that's
absolutely
huge. Yeah. Now, so let me start with, first of all, for those who don't know who Nick Libous is, many people may have heard the name in general, but they don't know who you are. So who is Nick Libous?
Well, Nick Libous has been managing and running a small business for the past decade. I've been working with tower climbers, and the company that I work with is a small tower construction company. And we have technicians, we have people who do construction, we have tower climbers. And one of my main roles at WCS is managing the individuals here, managing our equipment, tools, making sure projects are done on time, making sure our guys are being paid on time. So running and managing a small business, I think, is probably something that we want to see more in government. We want to see business managers. We want to see good managers in the private sector move into government, move into the public sector. That's one thing that I'm glad you asked, because, people want to know, what are you about? What do you do? Where's your experience? And a lot of people say, well, you don't have any government experience, Nick. You don't have government experience, so why are you running for office? I like to say, well, that's exactly why I'm running for office. I think we need more private sector-minded individuals in the public sector. You're held accountable in the private sector. In the public sector, if the government spends too much money, they go into debt, and everybody shows up the next day. In a private business, you don't get to show up the next day. everybody has to go home. So I think that accountability is something that I would like to bring to Albany.
Well, Albany needs a lot of things, and accountability is
Certainly.
one of them. A lot less corruption would be another. I think people would highlight really quick.
I agree. And I think for corruption, I've said this before. I don't think any bureaucrat or any prosecutor or even any particular person is going to fix corruption in Albany. I think what we need to do is we need to impose term limits on all statewide elected officials. I think if we do that, we'll help limit corruption, and we'll put new people in there to go through the process so that we have new representation from time to time. And I think that would be a good way to root out some corruption in Albany.
Well, okay. So, one thing I want to backtrack on. You were mentioning towers. So people who are not familiar with it, when you say towers, are we talking about radio towers, cell towers, buildings? What kind of towers?
We're talking about cellular towers, like the ones you usually see when you're going down the road and you're going down the highway and you see that big metal thing in the sky. Those are essentially where we work, where most of our work is done. And sometimes you'll see those towers that look like trees, or trees that look like towers. I guess they more look like.
True.
That's the same thing. It's just a cellular tower, and they're all throughout the Northeast. I mean, they're everywhere. They're throughout the country, but they need a lot of maintenance, Mike. They need a lot of upkeep, and there's a lot that goes on at each site. And there's probably a site every 3 miles or so.
I didn't know there was that many.
When you put that into account, there's a lot of work out there to be done. So we're really working on the Northeast infrastructure, wireless infrastructure, and it's quite an industry. It's something that I got into back in 2009 in the turn of the economy, and we're still in it. We're still doing okay, and it's something that I really enjoy.
Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure people were clear about that because not everyone would know exactly.
Absolutely.
And now I want to also address, because you brought up term limits, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. And I want people to know, this is your first race. As you mentioned, you've never been a candidate before. So it's a little different because there's not a history to go back on with you than as opposed to some of the other elected officials or candidates I've spoken to in the past. But you're mentioning term limits, and this is something that I've heard a few candidates in this year, this cycle, be talking about. So when you're talking about term limits, how many years does a candidate get, or how many terms does a candidate get before they're no longer able?
Well, Mike, what I would like to see is right now, you're elected in the state legislature, you serve for 2 years. What I would like to see is if you're elected, you serve for 4 years, but you only have 3 opportunities to do so. So your term limited to 3. Now, if we extend the terms from 2 to 4 years, I believe that's going to take a lot of money out of politics. It's going to take a lot of special interest money out of it, and it's going to take a lot of outside money out of it, and it's going to put more power in the hands of the people. I think that if we do 4-year terms, it would be better all around because of that. And I think that's something that we should consider.
Okay. So in total, you're talking about 12 years, though. So
yes. And don't get me wrong. This is all negotiable. I would love to negotiate it with the Assembly and the Senate. I think the basic idea is, yes, it's term limits, but if I had to say, I would say 3 terms, 4 years apiece, and then you move forward with another representative.
Right. Well, I'm assuming that, like many things in the Assembly, something can't get changed, but in terms of something that might be considered fundamental or a constitutional, state constitution issue. So removing that, then just looking at the ultimate goal is 12 years. Is that accurate to what you're thinking?
I think that's a fair point. Yes, I think that's a fair amount of years. As I said, it would be up for negotiation. I mean, I don't think I would just go in there and say 12 and that's it. I think if other legislators some may want to make it 10, some may want to make it 16. I think that would be negotiable, but what's important is that they are term limited.
Yeah, I think it's very important. And I know it's been a big issue in a lot of places, even in Utica. I know a lot of people down here and the Southern Tier don't hear about what happens in Utica. There's a big scandal about that, about term limits and what the exact time frame is. So it's a very topical issue, and I'm glad that you and a couple of other candidates have brought that up. George
Absolutely.
and a few others.
No, I think it's important. And if you think of term limits, I mean, we want to have situations like Sheldon Silver, who was there for so long. I mean, he was just there for such a long time. And you get people such as Cliff Crouch, who's just been there for so long. And he's fallen into double dipping and voting for third trimester abortions. So, I mean, what happens is you lose accountability. And I think term limits will help bring it back.
To be accurate and to be fair, Clifford Crouch, who's Assemblyman Clifford Crouch, who I have interviewed previously. I don't know if you heard that interview or not, but I did speak with him as well. He's been in office for 23 years. He's only been challenged twice in an election, and he's never had a primary challenge before. So this is a first for him, and something he hasn't had to do in over 10 years in terms of have a challenger.
Yes.
So obviously it would seem that and I didn't ask him that directly, I don't believe, in my interview with him, but 23 years in and going for another 2, term limits is not on his radar. That's just a fact.
No, I don't believe they are. He has mentioned something about term limits for legislative leaders to kind of combat my position of term limits for all statewide elected officials. But I think that's really just window dressing, because he knows that he's really has never done anything about term limits, and it doesn't look like he ever will. So,
is the term limits because of the corruption that we've seen, like the Assemblywoman in just recently this year in Brooklyn, who was removed because of her corruption? She wasn't in very long. A few others. I mean, every year we hear at least 1 or 2 assembly members across the state who've been in for 5, 10, 15 years, wind up with some kind of, I mean, besides the big scandals with Skelos and with Silver, there's still every year 1 or 2 assembly members that wind up who've been in for 5 to 15 years, and they wind up going
It's really alarming, isn't it, Mike? It's scary. And I think, as I said before, unfortunately, I don't think no one law or one prosecutor or person can really solve this problem. I think we've got to come together and issue bills and put bills on the floor such as term limits. I think that will help put new faces in the process. And I think that's what we should be encouraging, is new faces in the process, because, you get stuck in those old ideas, and unfortunately you get stuck with somebody such as Mr. Crouch, who's voted for third trimester abortions, and people really don't even know it. And you've got to really get the word out there. But what happens is they stay around for so long, it's just they become window dressing, really.
Well, we're going to definitely address some of the things you've mentioned in your campaign that you're standing for in reference to Mr. Crouch's record and also what you're looking to change. But I want to, because people don't know you, we seem to have lost him. Give me 1 second. We'll get him right back. All right, folks, we had a technical issue somewhere. That's the thing when we're on phones and we're doing an interview. Sometimes this will happen, and we dropped out for a second, but you're back with us, correct, Nick?
Yes, I'll have to call AT&T this afternoon, Mike. I apologize.
Not a problem. Not a problem at all. I was just about to mention, because people don't know who you are, and I know a lot of first-time candidates don't get a lot of attention like they should as compared to someone who's an incumbent. I want to make sure people know who you are. So one of the things is, you hit on it a little bit, people don't know, why would someone who's not been in politics, not been elected before, not run in a race before, why would you want to get into this process? It's a difficult process.
It is very difficult and challenging. Well, I think it goes to what I was just saying. I think we need new, young blood, fresh people in the process. And for some reason, the establishment really pushes against that. When I told the local party that I wanted to run, it was almost more like I was telling them something bad rather than good. And I think that for some reason you've got that establishment mentality that pushes the current candidate or their guy, so to speak. And this happens a lot more than people realize. The party bosses pick their guy or gal, and then they work hard for them, and they tell everybody else in the party to work hard for them. If you're not that guy or girl, you're almost looked at as a problem or an issue. And right now, the party bosses in the counties of the 122nd district look at me as that problem or that issue. They don't want me to challenge the status quo or the establishment. And I think we need new people to do this. I think we need people to challenge sitting representatives who don't represent us. And I think that's exactly what we have right now with our current representative in the 122nd district.
Well, I know that the GOP for Broome County, they've had some issues in this election cycle in picking, in particular with the Broome County sheriff's race, where they interjected their thoughts rather than the public when it came to that race, and Jason Ellis and Sheriff Harder on the Republican Party. So we've seen that happen just in this election cycle. So a lot of people were concerned about that. And I know I had spoken about it before as well. It should be a decision by the public, in my opinion. So I can understand how that can be difficult. I know you actually traveled, and I remember going to several events where you and Mr. Crouch were together. And prior to this election, I think it was about a year and a half ago. So then they took a different turn on that. Is that correct?
I was talking with Mr. Crouch, and I had told him that I wanted to run for state assembly, and I wanted to run for his seat when he retired.
So it was known, and you both were friendly. You're both friendly with each other.
Yes, and it was known, and I mean, and we were friendly before that. My father had worked with Mr. Crouch, obviously, and they had a working relationship, and so yeah, I mean, they knew where I was coming from. They knew where my ambitions were. They knew I wanted to serve, so it was no secret.
And it's not this isn't a personal issue, and nothing personally between you and Mr. Crouch in the fact that you're running.
Not in my eyes, no. I mean, this is really about the issues that affect the people in my eyes. And as I said, he's the only Republican to vote for a form of the for third trimester abortions. He's voted for a form of the red flag law. He's got a lot of issues that I think the voters need to look at when it comes to his voting record.
Okay, so let's address the issues themselves. I'm glad you brought that up. But I just want to give people a clear background, and I know one of the questions is sometimes, is this personal? So I want to make sure that was understood and answered. So
it's not on my end.
Right.
I can't answer for Mr. Crouch, though, Mike. I will say this. He's used pictures of my deceased father and mailers and negative mailers against me. He's flat out lied. He said that I've been arrested before. I've never been arrested. He said I've sued the state for $5 million. I've never sued the state for $5 million.
That's not entirely correct. Let me clarify.
What is not correct?
Because I did find, and I was actually going to bring that up in a minute. Let me clarify, because there's a mailer for people who are not aware. Yesterday, on it was September 10th, there was a mailer that was received by many people in the 122nd district, and on that mailer, it alleged it's directly from Clifford Crouch, Assemblyman Clifford Crouch. It has his personal address, his personal name on this flyer. So it's from him directly as a campaign. And in it, it makes several allegations. It states that, don't know what that was. Sorry. It makes several allegations. One, that you had sued New York State for $5 million.
Which is incorrect.
Well, let me go through them all, and
Sure.
I want to clarify. It states that you were arrested in 2016 for harassment. It says that you had just moved into the district a couple of months ago. It states that you have no record of community service. It states that you had proven that you don't have experience. So
And
That's
and
the
Mike,
yeah.
every single one of those is incorrect. So I'd love to hear you challenge me on one of them.
No, I'm not challenging you. I just want to say, because I when I see something like this, I look for it. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Oh, if you look up my arrest record, there is none. It doesn't exist. I've never been arrested. So
I've
that's
been looking for it, and with a name like Libous, the family name for this region for 3 decades, pretty much anything and everything your family has done shows up somewhere in some record. I can't find a 2016 or any
it's
arrest that has ever happened for you on any. I can't even find a parking ticket for you.
no, 'cause you won't. That's why I think it's really sad that Mr. Crouch is adopting this style of campaign.
Yeah, that's. I just don't understand where that comes from, and there's no attribute. There's nothing that attributes any in this flyer that was sent out that many people may have received. There is nothing that says, where's the proof of that? Where's the source for this information? And there is nothing that says that. So I don't see that anywhere. And I do have to say publicly, I don't know where they're getting that from, because I haven't had a chance to speak with Mr. Crouch for him to clarify where he gets that. I have yet to find it.
Well, I and this is going to go back to the party chairman and how the party bosses work hard for their supposed guy or gal. Our party chairman, Bijoy Data, has been doing nothing but basically running Cliff Crouch's campaign. He wants to see nothing more than for a new representative to represent us in that seat. So he's doing everything he can, such as making up lies like this, putting them in the mail against me, because he knows that we have a race here.
Now, there is one thing I do want to mention.
Sure.
For the lawsuit, in 1998, when you were 21, you were in a vehicle that had a car accident. Is that correct?
When I was 17, I was in a vehicle, that hydroplane. I was not driving, but yes, that is correct.
Right. As I said, you're a passenger in the vehicle. This is not something you didn't cause the accident. You were a passenger in it.
Right, and my hip was dislocated. I almost died in the vehicle in the car accident. My hip was dislocated. I couldn't walk for 6 months. It was a very traumatic experience.
Absolutely. Now, I do see, and this may have been done by your lawyers, may have been done. Normally, I see there was a lawyer there. I see that there was a lawsuit that was created, which included New York State, which is normal. In many lawsuits, you name everybody and anybody who's connected to the lawsuit for injuries in a lawsuit, which included New York State.
And if there's anything online saying that we pursued a lawsuit, it's 100% false, because we didn't. There may have been papers drafted by the firm, perhaps. That's what you're saying. I don't know what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there was, and it's standard.
The firm could have drafted papers, but I assure you, as soon as they came to me at the time, I told them I'm not suing the state. My father was the state senator at the time, and we knew that this was not something we wanted to pursue. We had sued the insurance company of the girl who was driving the car.
Right. That's normal practice to include everybody and anybody connected to a race.
Sure. And my lawyer then said, would you like to sue the driver personally? The girl, this is a girl that I knew that I went to school with. Mm-hmm. I said, absolutely not. I said, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not just going to start litigation like that and sue people that I know, even if there is money to be gotten. And I said, that's not right. And then she had mentioned to me that we can sue the state. And I had told her we're not doing that either. My father works for the state, and I don't think it would be worth pursuing, because it wouldn't be the right thing to do. And so we didn't sue the state. So I'm just not. If my lawyer drew up papers, well, then maybe she drew up papers. But I assure you, we never sued the state. So that's 100% false.
No, I'm not saying that it isn't. Someone may, so it can be found. There is a document online. I can tell you that there is a document online. I've seen it. Okay. But it's not a court case. It's just papers that are being filed, which is standard in any kind of lawsuit. And there is nothing that shows you actually went to court, that it actually was followed up. There's nothing that shows that any other decision on this case from that accident where you were a passenger And so
Okay.
I just want to make sure that.
I understand, but I still I stand with my earlier comment. And it's true.
Right.
I never sued the state.
Yeah.
They may have seen that and thought that it was okay to put that in a mailer. That's their decision. But the fact is, it's false. It's another lie of 5 lies on a piece of mail that Cliff Crouch put out.
Absolutely. I just want to make sure that it was giving everybody full context. And
no,
from 1998, who remembers, right?
Well, no, but thank you for clearing that up, because apparently you're saying there's something online there that I'm not aware of, that if you go to, you're saying it comes up. That's good that we're discussing it, because some people can be confused by it.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the brand of politics that BJoy Data employs. He'll take something like that, he'll see it, and he'll make it look like something bad when it's absolutely nothing at all.
Right.
And that's the type of person we're dealing with the Broome County Republican chairman.
Yeah, and I know people will look it up and they'll say, well, Mike, I see this. Why didn't you ask about it?
Right. And BJoy Data, working with my father back that long ago, probably remembered me when I couldn't walk and is now using this in a political campaign. And that tells you the kind of character we're dealing with the chairman of the local Broome County Republicans.
Yeah. So I'm glad that we clarified too. So those are the 2 major claims on there, that there was a lawsuit, but I can't find the lawsuit. It doesn't exist, but I do see it in the paper.
So there's no lawsuit. There's no arrest record, because I've never been arrested.
Yeah,
and then the third one is
address.
I just moved into my house a few months ago, which is totally false. We built that place in 2001, and I actually moved there permanently in 2016. But I've been there for almost 20 years now.
Okay.
It's our family home, and it's just another, I guess, below the belt lie that Cliff is trying to put out there. You know what though? This is what politicians do when they're desperate, though, Mike. They do this when they're desperate. So it tells me that there's something going on here, and it's exciting me. It's exciting the voters. I'm excited for this Thursday to see what the results are going to be.
Absolutely, and it's interesting because this has been a very odd race. I mean, there was an announcement by Mr. Crouch that he was running, and then he made a re-announcement just before you announced that you were running. It's a little odd. And I did ask him about some of these things. And people can refer back to that interview. One of the things that you mentioned as well that I think is important, and I want to get to the issues. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to cover some of the issues. There's 2 points you mentioned about abortion and the red flag laws. Let me address the abortion.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned that, and Mr. Crouch didn't speak about the abortion issue with me, but it is correct. In 2015 and again in 2016, Mr. Crouch was almost the only. In 2015, he was one of 2 Republicans in the New York State Assembly. In 2016, he was the only Republican in the New York State Assembly that voted to extend the time frame that someone can have an abortion to up to 6 months. So a 6-month interim baby could be aborted, and he voted for that along with all the Democrats in the party. And for anyone who's looking for that bill, the exact bill number is A6221, and that was in March of 2015. And then again, there was another vote in June of 2016. Now, you mentioned you're against that. Can you tell me, where do you stand about abortion?
I am entirely pro-life. I do not believe in 3rd trimester abortions like Mr. Crouch. I don't believe in the 2nd or the 1st. I'm a pro-life candidate. I believe we got to stand up for life. I believe it's a human rights issue. And right now we have somebody who doesn't represent our values. And I think this issue really hits home to a lot of the voters. I was out at in Fenton yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
We were at a gathering, a nice church gathering, and a lot of people there didn't understand why Mr. Crouch didn't show up. And then I'd mentioned to him, well, probably because he's the only pro-abortion assemblyman in the state and he represents us. And people say, I didn't know that. He voted for that? He voted for 3rd trimester abortions? And I say, yeah, he did. And it's really about giving them the information, because it goes back to what you said before. No one's really covering this race, and it's unfortunate because there's some serious issues here.
Well, I know that I was speaking to someone just on Monday. I was giving a speech at SUNY Broome, and we were talking before the event, and they had brought up that a couple of the issues about this race, the 122 assembly race, and they mentioned your position about abortion, and they were surprised because I had already found this in my research for this interview, that it's absolutely correct that he did vote for a second term 6-month abortion, which is surprising.
And you know what, Mike? He did that again this year. The RHA was up for a vote again. I believe it was March. And what the RHA really is yes, it allows third trimester abortions without a physician present, but it's also a law that New York State liberals are using to get around Donald Trump's Supreme Court picks. So not only is Mr. Crouch voting in favor of abortion, he's voting against our president, and he's voting in favor of the liberal Democrats in Washington. So, I really question that vote that he's made more than once in Albany. And back to the RHA. The RHA is a bill that downstate politicians have wanted to push through for quite some time now. Their problem is the Senate. The Senate has been blocking it. And thankfully, we still have the majority there. But after this year, they may not have that majority. So we may be in real trouble when it comes to this law. So this bill that Mr. Crouch voted for could become law very soon.
Well, it's a very, like many of the things that face the assembly, there's a lot of things that are somewhat troubling. And people have to be aware of this and know what the votes are, and know where our candidates stand when it comes to these issues. And that brings up the issue of speaking about something that most people don't know about, is the red flag laws, which I've done extensive research on.
Mike, I don't mean to jump in, but going door to door, and I've literally knocked on thousands of doors this year, going door to door through petitions, through trying to meet people. And I got to be honest with you, I was a little surprised that a lot of folks did not know what the red flag law, even in Republican circles, they weren't really too familiar with it. And this is yet another bill that Cliff voted for at one point. I know he voted against it he voted for it before he voted against it. But it is alarming how many people don't know exactly what it is. So I think it's good that you're shedding light on it.
Well, I'm trying my best. It's a very scary law. I've done a lot of research on that. If people are interested, they can look this up.
It is a scary law. I agree.
Yeah, completely removes due process. I've spoken to lawyers about this. I've spoken to members, elected officials about it. And I also spoke to Mr. Crouch about it. And he mentioned that he had voted for it because he thought it would make people safer. And yet, this is a bill that takes away due process, and I did question him about that. He just thought it would help people. He didn't go into greater detail really about that, but people can listen to the actual interview and find out for themselves, or some of the work I've done on this issue, because it is a big one. Where do you stand on it?
I oppose it.
Okay.
I am against the red flag law. I think the way it's written right now, it's definitely a violation of our Second Amendment right. I don't think that putting such power in the hands of bureaucrats at school is gonna be a positive thing at all. I'm really against this law. I don't think it makes us safer in any regard. I think it opens the door to the government coming into your house, violating your privacy, and we really don't need to be doing that at all. I'm really against this law, and we've got to protect our schools. I understand that we need more school resource officers. We've got to attack the mental illness issue that's encompassing school shootings. But this red flag law is another example of, I think, government going overboard and overreacting to an issue that certainly does need to be dealt with.
And to be clear for people who are not familiar with it, just to give you a quick recap, essentially the red flag law says that Someone can go to a court, make a complaint against you, verify that claim because you bought a steak knife, a baseball bat, basically almost anything. The police will then go to your house with a warrant, and at that point is the first time you'll be notified that anything has happened. This is all done in secret without you being there present to defend yourself. They will come into your home, take any and all firearms that may be there, whether they're yours or not, and take them away from you. So you're being punished without ever having been convicted of a crime or even accused of a crime.
Correct.
And one other thing is that as a consequence of that, because of the laws in New York State, any children present in the home would also have to be taken, because if the home is so dangerous that you have to have your Second Amendment rights taken away, well, it's too dangerous for children, and so they need to be taken away as well.
I think it's an extreme overreach of government power, quite frankly. I think it's a dangerous road that we're going down when we start voting for red flag laws and making it law.
Absolutely. Now, one other major issue that you stand for is in reference to, and this is something that everyone is always paying attention to, property taxes and their money, the economy.
Yes. I say this a lot when I go around and talk to people because it's important, and I think people need to realize it. Upstate New York has some of the highest property taxes in America, and that's not something to be proud of. And I think the least we have to do is to make that property tax cap permanent throughout and past 2020, because right now it expires in 2020, and if it does expire, the downstate politicians will raise our taxes here upstate. Our property taxes will go up, and we have to put that cap into place to make sure that doesn't happen. And I would like to see property taxes go down, but we have to approach it a step at a time and make sure that the cap is in place so that they don't rise.
And I think it's something that a lot of people will be interested in seeing that happen. Now, here's a question that I know a lot of people ask, and it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't have the experience as an elected official, and because these are very touchy issues, how do you think you can get this done? Any of the things that you're looking at, term limits, property tax cap, protecting Second Amendment rights, how can you get that done?
Well, I think when you go to Albany and you look at the makeup in the assembly, if you have an R by your name, you're going to have an uphill battle to get anything done.
Get it.
And I think you've got to be louder, you've got to be stronger, you've got to be bolder, and you've got to work across the aisle when you want to get things done. You really do. I mean, I know that we've got liberals from New York and Democrats up there that are raising our taxes, and we've got to fight against that, but we've got to also find common ground. And I think if we can do that, we'll be able to accomplish some goals up there. But I also think that as a legislator and being in the minority in the assembly, if that were the case, I think communication between your constituents and your government is actually very important. You really need that, because you are limited when you're in the minority, and people want to know what's going on. But that doesn't mean, Mike, that you can't go up there and work with Democrats and get things accomplished for the common good.
No,
I mean,
absolutely
it's an uphill battle. I mean, if there's roughly, I believe it's 36 Republicans in the assembly, and then there's over 100 Democrats. So I mean, the ratio is against you. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't get things done. I mean,
get
bills done.
That means you got to work harder, and that you've got to look for other Democrats and to get votes, and that's what you got to do. I mean, you've got to work with the people that you work with. It's that simple. But you can get it done. You talk to people and you work with them, and I mean, you got to fight. You got to let them know that you're not just going to roll over and die. And I personally think we have an assemblyman who doesn't put up that fight, who kind of does roll over and doesn't really fight for us.
Well, that's an important thing to highlight, and I want people to know this is the race is essentially a Republican race. It's between you and Mr. Crouch. So the primary isn't quite the final word on this, because you also have the conservative ticket that you're running on that ballot. But
yes, that is correct. I'm very proud to have the state Conservative Party's endorsement. The executive committee of the state Conservative Party, they noticed Cliff Crouch and his voting record, and then they noticed me, and it was pretty much a pretty easy matchup right there. And I teamed up with the Conservative Party, and they have true values and principles that represent our community, and Cliff doesn't share those values. They saw that. They saw his voting record, and they were pleased to support me, and I'm honored to have their endorsement.
Okay, so you're looking to go all the way to November.
I am 100% looking to go all the way to November and to Albany in January, yes.
Okay. That is assuming if, and again, it's a big if, because this is a tight race, if you could theoretically win everything on November 13th when everyone goes out to vote in the primaries, which were delayed because of 9/11.
Yes.
You'll be able to, if you win the Republican ticket, there is no Democratic challenger. It's just a race between you and Mr. Crouch. So if you win the Republican ticket, essentially you're done.
Essentially, I do know that I believe there's another party line that Mr. Crouch had gotten. I think he picked up the reform line.
Did he? I didn't look at the reform.
I think he did, Mike. Not, and you've got to take every challenger and every party seriously, and that's exactly what I'll do. So, this doesn't end until November, but this Thursday is going to be a huge factor in deciding who the Republican Party has chosen, who the Republican voters, the people, have chosen. And I think whoever receives that nomination is going to be in really good shape. But yes, this is going to be this is not going to be a typical election, because there is no Democrat in it, and it's fought within the Republican Party as of right now. So yeah, there's a lot riding on Thursday, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay. I know we've covered a lot of things, and I know it's a first time candidate. I like to give you guys a lot of time and make sure we cover a lot of issues, a lot of different aspects. I know we don't have much time left, but let me offer, is there any question, any issue that people have been bringing up to you as you've been out speaking with them, going around the area, or anything else that you wanted to speak to voters about? I just open it up to you, and anything else you would like to say.
Well, I think one of the issues people talk to me about is honestly taxes. I think taxes are obviously in our state too high. People do not like that. Whenever I'm at an event, whenever I'm talking with somebody, they talk about property taxes. They talk about their taxes and how, it affects their life. It hurts them. They think about leaving the state. And, we've lost 1 million people since 2010, New York State.
1.2
residents. 1.2. So, I mean, it's growing, and it's happening. It's happening right now. And I think people leaving the state because of the tax burden is a huge issue, especially here in upstate. Down in New York City, it's a different environment down there. Money is flowing more frequently. People and businesses can pay higher taxes in Manhattan and places like that. But up here in upstate, it is not like that. We do not have the same environment here, so we shouldn't be able to have to pay the same level of taxes. It really sends people out of upstate New York, and I think we have to fight that. We've got to get that property tax cap permanent just to start.
Okay, and I know there's a lot of people who agree with that. It's a very big issue, and everyone's addressing it. Anything that turns around the exodus out of New York that we've seen over the last 8 years under Governor Cuomo, we've lost 1.2 plus. We're expecting to lose 1.5 million people by the next year, and we're looking at it's crazy. We've lost tens of thousands of businesses. We've lost 1.3, I believe, $1.3 trillion in state tax revenue. It's insane.
It's a spiral, and it's unfortunate. We've got to do something immediately.
Absolutely. Everyone agrees on that. I think so. Well,
I think so.
let me ask you, Nick, what did you think of the interview? I know as a first-time candidate, you don't always get as much press as you would like. What did you think?
I appreciate the time that you gave me. I think you asked a lot of good questions. I think you asked the questions that are going to affect the voters in the 122nd district. I'm really surprised that the media has not been giving this much attention at all. I mean, don't get me wrong. I did a few interviews yesterday, but other than that, the media hasn't really reached out since the day I've announced. And as you said earlier, a lot is riding on Thursday. Thursday, there's a lot of importance there in this primary election. I am surprised that the media hasn't really been talking about the race as much as you are, for example, and I do appreciate that. And it really was a pleasure to be here with you today, Mike.
Absolutely. Oh, how was it in the event that you went to? I believe Matt Ryan may have been there, and Dave Harder.
Matt Ryan was there. Dave Harder was there. Yeah, it was an event at the Path of Life Church out in Fenton, and it was a candidates night where we all were invited to go and talk about the issues and what affects the people. And Mr. Crouch did not show up. I should say that we've been asked to do 4 debates, Mr. Crouch and I, and he's turned every single one down.
4? There were 4. I knew of the one with Path of Life, but there was 3 others.
No, and then there's other. And he's turned everyone down, every single one. So he's gotten, I believe, 5 dates actually, and he's turned them all down. So he's hiding from the issues. He's hiding from me, and it's unfortunate the media is not covering it, because if they were, I think people would really realize what he's all about. So, but we're putting up a good fight. We're fighting based on the issues, and we're going to keep on doing that.
Okay. I just wondered, because I know the event happened yesterday and I didn't see anything on it, so I wanted to ask about how that went and if they did show up. And what you
Matt Ryan was there, the sheriff was there, Bill Bowie was there. Bill Bowie's running for Fenton Town Supervisor. Jason Peoples was there. And yeah, I mean, it was a good event. We shared ideas with the voters, and yeah, it was a good time. And I think that's what this is about. I think this is what you should have to do. And I think it's too bad Mr. Crouch didn't show up and give his opinion to the voters.
Well, these kind of events are important. I always advise people to go out to them whenever possible. And most importantly, I do, again, advise people on September 13th to go out. Your vote matters, always. Every vote matters. I've seen too many races where we've seen votes literally in New York, in the Broome County region, turn because of just one vote or maybe a handful of votes. So every vote does matter. And I do advise people go out and vote. But with that said, I don't want to, I know we've taken up a bit of your time here, because I know you're out shaking hands and meeting people beforehand.
Yeah. We're gonna hit the phones now, it looks like. So yeah, it's a lot of work running the campaign. You've got the establishment against you, so you really only have your own volunteers. So it's a lot of work, but it's well worth it, and I really enjoy it. So,
and I'm glad that we can help people learn more about you, so they can make an educated decision for themselves.
Absolutely. And thanks for the time, Mike. I appreciate it.
You're very, very welcome. And everyone, remember, this is No Soundbites Allowed, where you get to speak to the candidates as well as the elected officials in the races that matter for your life every day. And we thank you for joining us in this exclusive.